Get out. Tonight. Rose Darcy stared at her husband in disbelief, her newborn twins crying weakly in her arms just 6 hours after an emergency C-section. Blood still seeped through her hospital gown, but Jack Wickham's designer suit remained pristine as he paced their delivery room like a predator. "Jack, what are you? You ruined everything." His voice was ice. "My promotion, my future, my life. And those things—" He gestured at their daughters with disgust. "Sealed it. Before we continue, if you want to know how Rose completely outsmarts her husband and reclaimed her dignity, hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment where you are watching from. Believe me, you don't want to miss what happens next." Rose's hands shook as she clutched Lily and Emma, barely 6 pounds each, still fighting for every breath. "Jack, please, I just gave birth. You need to leave. Security will escort you if necessary." The monitor screamed as Rose's blood pressure spiked. This couldn't be real. 6 hours ago, he'd whispered that everything would be perfect. Now he was throwing them out. Bleeding mother, dying babies, nothing but $17 and the clothes on her back. But what Jack didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that the broken woman he was discarding in that sterile hospital room would rise from his cruelty to build something worth $200 million. Something that would destroy him completely. What Rose didn't realize yet was that her husband's betrayal wasn't random cruelty. It was calculated destruction. And the reason why will make your blood run cold. 3 hours later, Rose sat in a hospital parking garage with $17, 2 crying newborns, and nowhere to go. Her cesarean incision screamed with each breath as rain hammered the concrete around them. She'd tried everyone. Diana in Seattle straight to voicemail. Her parents had made their position clear 3 years ago. Choose Jack or choose family. She'd chosen wrong. That's when Nurse Catherine Bennett found her, still in scrubs, keys in hand. "I stayed late, hoping you'd change your mind." Catherine's voice carried the weight of someone who'd survived this storm. "It's not charity, Rose. It's survival." 20 minutes later, Rose sat in Catherine's passenger seat, watching the city blur through rain-streaked windows. The vanilla air freshener couldn't mask the scent of her own desperation. But for the first time since Jack's devastating words, she wasn't thinking about the next hour. She was thinking about tomorrow. 25 years ago, my husband left me with twin boys and a flower shop he thought would fail. Catherine glanced at Rose in the mirror. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Catherine's apartment above Bloom and Flourish smelled of lavender and second chances. As Rose settled the twins into makeshift cribs fashioned from dresser drawers, she felt something stir beneath the exhaustion. Not hope exactly, but possibility. 6 weeks later, Rose discovered she had a gift. Her hands moved through Catherine's flower inventory with intuitive precision, creating wedding arrangements that made brides weep and photographers linger. The twins thrived in their flower shop sanctuary, their carriers nestled among roses and baby's breath. "You're wasted here," Catherine said, watching Rose transform simple stems into art. "This vision you have, it's worth something." The shop's bell chimed, and Sebastian Turner stepped inside, bringing rain and turpentine. Rose had watched him through the gallery windows, always paint-stained, always intense. "That's extraordinary," he said, studying Rose's latest bouquet with an artist's eye. "Real vision." Before Rose could respond, her phone buzzed with a message that stopped her heart. "I know where you are. Dad's dying. He's left you something Jack doesn't know about. Something that changes everything." The flowers scattered from her hands. Diana had found her. Sebastian steadied her elbow. "Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone." But as the second message arrived, $25 million inheritance. "He has to see you claim it in person. 30 days after death or it goes to charity." Rose realized her quiet life was over. Her past was calling. And with it came either salvation or complete destruction. The question was, which would Jack allow her to have? Diana Bennett arrived like a storm in designer clothes and desperation. Rose watched from Catherine's window as her sister stepped out of a sleek rental car, her red hair catching the afternoon light like fire. 3 years hadn't dulled Diana's sharp edges. If anything, they'd honed them to a dangerous point. "She looks like you," Sebastian observed quietly. He'd stayed after the shop closed, claiming he needed to finish a painting, but really providing silent support as Rose wrestled with ghosts. "She looks like what I used to be," Rose corrected, adjusting Emma's blanket. The twins sensed tension, they always did, and had been fussy all afternoon. Diana's knock was crisp, authoritative, the sound of someone accustomed to doors opening for her. "Hello, Rosie." 3 years collapsed into nothing. Diana stood in the doorway looking polished and successful, her eyes immediately cataloging the modest apartment, the babies, the evidence of how far Rose had fallen. But instead of pity, Rose saw something unexpected. Respect. "You look." Diana paused, searching for words. "Stronger. Stronger than when my husband threw me out with newborns?" Low bar. Diana stepped inside, her movements careful around the baby gear scattered across Catherine's living room. "Dad's been asking for you for months. The cancer, it's aggressive. He has maybe 2 weeks. Rose's throat tightened. "And the will. Grandmother's trust fund. The one Dad said he'd never access." Diana's voice dropped to a whisper. $25 million, Rose. It's been sitting there for 30 years, growing. He's leaving it all to you." The number hit like a physical blow. 25 million. More money than Jack earned in a decade of corporate climbing. "There's a catch," Diana continued. "You have to claim it in person. And there's a time limit. If you don't appear within 30 days of his death, it reverts to charity." Sebastian stood quietly by the window, but Rose felt his presence like an anchor. Catherine bustled in with tea, her movements deliberately normal in the face of extraordinary circumstances. "Your father," Catherine said carefully. "He disowned you for marrying Jack?" "He said Jack was a fortune hunter with empty eyes," Diana answered. "Turned out he was right, just not about the fortune part." Rose's mind raced. 25 million would mean freedom, security for the twins, the ability to build something real. But it also meant facing her father's deathbed, confronting the years of silence, and, worst of all, potentially encountering Jack if he found out. "He doesn't know, does he?" Rose asked. "Jack doesn't know about the inheritance?" Diana shook her head. "Dad made sure of that. But Rose, you have to understand, this money comes with expectations. Dad wants to see you build something lasting. Not just spend it, but create something that matters." Over the next hour, as Diana outlined the inheritance details, Sebastian sketched quietly in the corner. His presence should have felt intrusive, but instead it grounded Rose, reminded her that she'd built new connections, new strength. "There's something else," Diana said finally. "Jack's been asking around about you. Subtle inquiries, but I think he's starting to worry about what you might know, or what you might become." Rose felt that familiar chill, but this time it was accompanied by something new. Anger. Pure, clean rage at the man who'd discarded her when she was most vulnerable. "Let him worry," she said quietly, surprising everyone including herself. "I'm not the same person he threw away." Sebastian looked up from his sketchpad, and their eyes met across the room. In his gaze, she saw recognition, not of who she'd been, but of who she was becoming. As Diana prepared to leave, promising to call with funeral arrangements, Rose realized that the quiet life she'd built was ending. But unlike 6 weeks ago, this time she was choosing to walk into the storm. The question was whether Jack Wickham was prepared for what was coming his way. Because Rose Darcy was done being discarded. Rose's father died on a Tuesday morning while she was feeding the twins. Diana's call came at 6:47 a.m., her voice hollow with exhaustion and something that might have been relief. "He's gone, Rosie," peacefully. "And he said your name at the end." The funeral was small, private, exactly as their father would have wanted. Rose stood at the graveside in Catherine's borrowed black dress, holding Lily while Sebastian cradled Emma with surprising tenderness. Diana had arranged everything, including a discreet security detail to ensure Jack didn't appear uninvited. But it was at the reading of the will that everything changed. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and old money, its mahogany panels reflecting the gray Seattle sky. Mr. Harrison Pemberton had been the family attorney for 40 years, his silver hair and kind eyes a constant through Rose's childhood. $25 million, he confirmed, sliding papers across the polished table, plus the coastal property in Maine and your grandmother's jewelry collection. But there's something else, Rose. Something your father asked me to give you only after his death. He handed her a sealed envelope, thick with years of secrets. Rose's hands trembled as she opened it, Diana leaning close to read over her shoulder. Inside was a letter in her father's careful script, and beneath it, a stack of photographs that made Rose's world tilt sideways. "My dearest Rose, I know you think I disowned you out of pride, but the truth is far more complicated. Jack Wickham didn't marry you for love, sweetheart. He married you because he knew about this inheritance." Rose's vision blurred. "That's impossible. The inheritance was secret." "Keep reading," Diana whispered, her voice strange. "Jack's been working with a private investigator for years, tracking wealthy families for investment opportunities. He found out about your grandmother's trust when you were still dating. I have proof, receipts, recordings, photographs. He planned everything, Rose, including getting you pregnant to secure his claim to the money through community property laws." The photographs spilled from Rose's nerveless fingers. Jack in meetings with a man she didn't recognize. Bank statements showing payments to something called Heritage Research Solutions. Most damning of all, a contract bearing Jack's signature, outlining his strategy to secure matrimonial access to the Darcy Trust. "But here's what Jack doesn't know," the letter continued. "The trust was restructured years ago. Spouses have no claim unless specifically named, and I made sure you were protected. By divorcing you so publicly, so cruelly, he eliminated any possible legal argument for shared assets." Diana's sharp intake of breath cut through Rose's shock. "Rose, this means—" "He destroyed his own plan," Rose whispered. "By throwing me out, by being so vicious about it. He gave up any claim to the money. But there was more." Her father's final revelation hit like a physical blow. "Jack knows you survived, Rose. He knows about the babies. And now he's realized his mistake. My lawyers tell me he's been making inquiries, trying to find a way back into your life. Be careful, sweetheart. A man who married you for money won't hesitate to destroy you for it. Use this inheritance wisely. Build something that matters. And know that I'm proud of the woman you've become in the darkness he left you in." Rose looked up to find Sebastian watching her with fierce protectiveness, Diana's face pale with understanding, and Mr. Pemberton waiting patiently for her decision. $25 million. Enough to disappear forever, to raise her daughters in safety and comfort. Or enough to do something Jack Wickham would never expect. Enough to fight back. "I want to contest the divorce," Rose said quietly. Diana stared at her. "Rose, you don't need. Not for money." Rose's voice grew stronger, more certain. "For justice. He planned everything, manipulated everything. Those papers he had me sign. If he defrauded me into marriage, if he married me under false pretenses, the divorce could be invalidated," Mr. Pemberton said slowly, "which would make his recent actions legally problematic." Sebastian stepped closer. "Rose, are you sure? Taking him on directly. He threw me out bleeding with newborn babies because he thought I was worthless," Rose said, steel threading through her voice. Now he's going to learn exactly what I'm worth. And it's not something he can steal, buy, or manipulate. As she signed the papers claiming her inheritance, Rose felt the final pieces of her old self fall away. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was preparing for war. Before we continue, I need you to pause right here because what happens next is going to absolutely devastate you in the most beautiful way possible. If you're not subscribed yet, I'm begging you, click that button now because Rose's transformation into the woman Jack never saw coming is about to begin. And you do not want to miss a single moment of this revenge. The legal papers were barely filed when Jack struck back with the precision of a predator who'd been waiting in shadows. Rose stood in Catherine's shop, reading the custody petition with trembling hands. Through her lawyer, Jack was demanding DNA tests, claiming the twins might not be his, that Rose had been unstable and promiscuous during their marriage. Worse, he'd filed an emergency motion claiming she was an unfit mother living in poverty. He can't do this, Diana said, her voice sharp with fury as she paced among the roses. The tests will prove they're his. That's not the point, Rose whispered. The twins slept peacefully in their carriers, unaware their world was crumbling again. He's trying to take them before I can access the inheritance. If he gets custody, he controls everything. Sebastian appeared in the doorway, his face grim. There's more. Someone's been asking questions about this place, about Catherine. Professional questions. Catherine's face went pale. What kind of questions? Building safety, business licenses, whether you're qualified to have children living upstairs. Sebastian's jaw tightened. They're building a case to prove this isn't a suitable environment. Rose felt the walls closing in. Jack's strategy was brutal in its simplicity. Destroy her credibility, take the twins, and position himself as their loving father seeking to protect them from their unstable mother. The inheritance would be meaningless if she lost her daughters. There's something else, Diana said quietly, checking her phone. Jack's engaged. To his secretary, apparently. They're planning a quick wedding. The room spun. Of course. A stable marriage would strengthen his custody case, paint him as the responsible parent ready to provide a proper home. Rose, Catherine said gently, maybe it's time to consider. What? Running. Rose's voice cracked. Taking the money and disappearing? She looked at her sleeping daughters, at the life she'd built from nothing in this tiny space above a flower shop. 6 weeks ago, Jack had thrown them away like garbage. Now he wanted them back because they represented access to a fortune. I can't fight him, she whispered. Not in court, not with lawyers. He has money, connections, respectability. I have. You have the truth, Sebastian said fiercely. But truth felt fragile against Jack's machine of destruction, especially when Rose's phone rang with news that shattered what remained of her hope. Miss Darcy? This is Child Protective Services. We've received concerning reports about the children's living situation. We need to conduct an immediate welfare check. Rose sank into a chair as everything she'd rebuilt began to collapse. Jack wasn't just taking her daughters, he was destroying her piece by piece, exactly as he'd done on that horrible night in the hospital. Only this time she had something to lose. The question was, did she have the strength to fight for it? The CPS caseworker was younger than Rose expected, with tired eyes and a voice that suggested she'd seen too much. Ms. Rachel Torres walked through Catherine's apartment with clinical efficiency, checking the twins' sleeping area, the refrigerator, the safety measures. The anonymous report claimed neglect, she said carefully, making notes. But I see healthy babies, clean living space, adequate resources. She paused, studying Rose. Someone really doesn't like you. My ex-husband wants custody, Rose said simply. He thinks it will help his case if I'm deemed unfit. Ms. Torres nodded knowingly. I've seen this playbook before. Rich ex-spouse tries to weaponize the system. She closed her tablet. For what it's worth, there's nothing here that concerns me. But be careful. Whoever filed this report isn't done. After she left, Rose sat in the gathering dusk feeling hollowed out. Jack was systematically dismantling her life, and she was letting him. That's when Sebastian knocked softly and entered with something that changed everything. "I've been thinking about what you said. About not being able to fight him." He sat across from her, his eyes intense. "But Rose, you're thinking like his victim. Not like the woman who rebuilt her life from nothing." "Sebastian, I appreciate." "No, listen." He pulled out his phone. "I called my ex-wife. She's an investigative journalist in New York. I told her about your situation, and she said something interesting about men like Jack." Rose's pulse quickened. "They always have secrets, Rose. Always. Men who manipulate and scheme, they leave trails." Sebastian leaned forward. "What if instead of defending against his attacks, you went on the offense?" Before Rose could respond, Diana burst through the door with something that made Rose's world shift again. "Rose, I found something." Diana's face was flushed with excitement and fury. "I hired my own investigator to look into Jack's finances. You're not going to believe this." She spread papers across the table: bank statements, property records, corporate filings. "Jack's been lying about everything. His company is hemorrhaging money. That promotion he was so worried about losing, he already lost it 6 months ago. The penthouse? He's 3 months behind on the mortgage. He's broke, Rose. Completely broke." Rose stared at the documents. "But his lawyer, the custody petition, paid for with credit cards and loans. He's drowning in debt." Diana's voice grew harder. "But here's the best part. He's been telling his creditors that he's expecting significant assets from your inheritance. He's already borrowed against money he thinks he's going to get." The pieces clicked into place. Jack wasn't just trying to take the twins out of spite. He was desperate. The inheritance was his last hope of financial survival. "He's trapped," Rose whispered, understanding flooding through her. Sebastian smiled grimly. "Desperate people make mistakes. And your father's evidence proves he married you fraudulently. That means criminal charges," Diana finished. "Fraud, conspiracy, possibly more. Jack isn't just fighting for custody, Rose. He's fighting to stay out of prison." For the first time since Jack had thrown her out, Rose felt power flowing through her veins instead of fear. She looked at her sleeping daughters, at the people who'd become her chosen family, at the evidence of Jack's desperation spread before her. "Call Mr. Pemberton," she said quietly. "Tell him I want to file criminal charges. All of them." "Rose," Diana started. "No more running. No more defending." Rose stood, and for the first time in months, she felt like herself again. "Jack wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But he's about to learn that the woman he discarded isn't the same woman he's fighting now." The twins stirred in their sleep, and Rose realized they would grow up knowing their mother never surrendered. Jack Wickham had made his final mistake. The confrontation came exactly where it had all begun: the courthouse where Jack had filed for custody. Rose walked up the marble steps in a navy suit Diana had bought her, carrying herself like the woman she'd become rather than the broken girl Jack had discarded. Behind her came Sebastian, Diana, Catherine, and Mr. Pemberton. Her chosen family, her armor against the past. Inside, Jack stood with his legal team, every inch the successful executive in his tailored suit. But Rose saw what others missed. The tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted nervously, the slight tremor in his hands. This was a man drowning. Their eyes met across the lobby, and for a moment, Rose saw him calculating, wondering if she was still the frightened woman he could manipulate. "Rose." Jack's voice was smooth, practiced. "You look, well."
"I'm glad.
"This custody matter doesn't have to be unpleasant if we can be reasonable." "Reasonable." Rose let the word hang between them. "Like when you called our daughters things, and threw us out while I was still bleeding?" Jack's composure cracked slightly. I was under stress. New fathers often struggle. New fathers don't marry women for their trust funds, Jack. The words hit like a physical blow. Jack's face went pale, then flushed with anger. I don't know what lies you've been fed. Heritage Research Solutions. Ring any bells? Rose pulled out the photographs her father had left her. 3 years of investigation into my family's finances. Payment records. The contract where you outlined your matrimonial strategy. Jack's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but Jack pushed him away. You can't prove any of that, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, she can. Detective Morrison stepped forward. Diana's journalist friend had connected them with someone who specialized in financial fraud. Mr. Wickham, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and criminal deception in the inducement of marriage. The courthouse lobby went silent. Jack stared at the handcuffs, then at Rose, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally, desperate calculation. Rose, wait. We can work this out. The girls, they need their father. I made mistakes, but I love them. I love you. Rose felt Sebastian's steady presence beside her. Catherine's warm hand on her shoulder. Diana's fierce protectiveness. But it was the memory of her twins sleeping peacefully in their carriers that gave her strength. You know what you love, Jack? You love the idea of $25 million. But here's what you never understood. That money isn't what makes me strong. You throwing us away is what made me strong. You abandoning us is what taught me who I really am. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. And who I am is someone you could never buy, sell, or control. Even when you had everything and I had nothing, I was still worth more than you. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Jack's carefully constructed facade finally shattered. You'll regret this, he snarled, the mask slipping completely. Those babies will grow up knowing their mother destroyed their father. No, Rose said with quiet finality. They'll grow up knowing their mother fought for them. Something their father never did. The custody petition was withdrawn that afternoon. Jack's engagement dissolved within hours when his fiancée discovered the arrests. By evening, news of his fraud charges had reached his remaining creditors. Standing on the courthouse steps in the golden afternoon light, Rose felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Complete freedom. So what now? Sebastian asked, his eyes warm with possibility. Rose looked at her sister, her surrogate mother Catherine, the man who'd stood by her through the storm, and thought of her daughters waiting at home. Now, she said, we build something beautiful. 5 years later, Rose Darcy Turner stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan office, watching the city stretch endlessly below. The brass nameplate on her desk read Rose Turner, CEO Bloom Enterprises, but the real measure of her success wasn't in the title or the corner office or even the $200 million valuation that had made headlines last month. It was in the laughter echoing from the adjoining playroom, where 5-year-old Lily and Emma were building elaborate flower arrangements from plastic blocks while Catherine, now their beloved grandmother in all but blood, read them stories about brave princesses who saved themselves. The Seattle acquisition went through, Diana announced, breezing into the office with her usual efficiency. As Bloom Enterprises CFO, she'd helped Rose build an empire from that first small flower shop in Seattle. 37 locations across the Pacific Northwest, all employing women transitioning out of difficult circumstances. Rose smiled, thinking of how it had all started. The inheritance had been the foundation, but Bloom Enterprises had grown from something deeper, the understanding that beauty could flourish in the darkest soil. Their business model was revolutionary. High-end floral design and event planning, staffed entirely by women rebuilding their lives. Every arrangement told a story of resilience. Mama! Emma burst through the door, her red curls bouncing. Uncle Sebastian finished the painting. Rose followed her daughter to Sebastian's studio, the converted conference room where he created the artwork that graced every Bloom Enterprises location. The canvas showed a woman's silhouette emerging from shadows into golden light, surrounded by flowers that seemed to dance with life. "It's beautiful," Rose breathed, slipping her arms around her husband's waist. Their wedding 2 years ago had been small, intimate. Catherine's flower shop transformed into something magical, with Diana walking Rose down an aisle scattered with petals from the very roses she'd once arranged while broken and bleeding. "It's you," Sebastian said simply, turning in her arms. "The woman I fell in love with in that flower shop. The woman who took her pain and transformed it into something that helps other women transform theirs." Through the studio windows, Rose could see the Hudson River, and beyond it, the life they'd built together. The twins had Sebastian's artistic eye and Rose's fierce determination. They knew their biological father only as someone who'd made bad choices, age-appropriate truth without venom. Jack had served 18 months for fraud and emerged to a world that had moved on without him. His business was gone, his reputation destroyed, his access to his daughters legally severed. He'd sent letters, occasionally, desperate attempts at reconciliation that Rose's lawyers handled with quiet efficiency. The man who'd once held such power over her had become a footnote in someone else's success story. "Mama, are you crying?" Lily appeared at her elbow, her dark eyes, so like Rose's own, full of concern. "Happy tears, sweetheart," Rose said, lifting her daughter. "Just thinking about how grateful I am." And she was grateful for the night that had nearly destroyed her, because it had taught her that strength wasn't about avoiding the storm. It was about learning to dance in the rain. Grateful for Catherine's compassion, Diana's loyalty, Sebastian's patient love. Grateful for the inheritance that had given her options, but mostly grateful for the resilience that had given her choices. "Mrs. Turner?" Rose's assistant appeared in the doorway. "Forbes is here for the interview about the IPO." Rose Darcy, the woman Jack Wickham had thrown away like garbage, was about to take her company public. The girl who'd sat bleeding on a park bench with $17 and 2 newborns was now featured on magazine covers as one of America's most innovative entrepreneurs. But her greatest achievement walked on small feet and called her mama. "Tell them 5 minutes," Rose said, kissing Lily's forehead. "I need to remind my daughters how much they're loved." As Sebastian gathered the twins for their afternoon snack, Rose took one last moment at the window. Somewhere out there, other women were sitting on park benches, holding babies and believing their lives were over. Tomorrow, Bloom Enterprises would announce their latest initiative, a scholarship program providing business training and childcare for single mothers with entrepreneurial dreams. Rose touched the simple silver necklace Sebastian had given her for their anniversary, a phoenix rising from flowers. She'd learned that the most beautiful blooms often grew from the deepest wounds. The woman Jack Wickham had discarded had built something he could never touch, never diminish, never destroy. And somewhere in the city below, she knew other phoenixes were spreading their wings. I hope Rose's journey touched your hearts the way it touched mine. Her transformation from a discarded woman to a $200 million empire builder proves that our lowest moments can become our launching pads. Tell me in the comments, which part of Rose's story resonated most deeply with you? Was it her courage in that hospital room, her determination to fight back, or her ability to transform pain into purpose? And if you haven't subscribed yet, please join our ducal family now, because stories like these remind us all that we're stronger than we know, braver than we feel, and more valuable than anyone who's ever made us feel small.